I am mining investor and editor of Resource Stock Digest, Gerardo Del Real, here with my partner, Senor Nicolas Hodge, who's also an investor and the publisher of Daily Profit Cycle. This is the 295th episode of our weekly therapy session that we call Investing in Bizarro World. We just got back from New Orleans. We're going to talk markets. We're going to talk sentiment. We're going to talk gold, month-end closings in the commodity space. Everything is awesome in the overall markets. Coming off of Thanksgiving, Mr. Hodge, how are you and the family doing, sir? How was Thanksgiving for you?
Thanksgiving was great, and I knew it was such because I got all the financial statements and MD&As in my inbox that all came out after the Canadian market closed on Wednesday, so us Americans wouldn't read all the dirt. I still read it. It was a great Thanksgiving. The turkey was wonderful. The company was just as good. How was yours, Gerardo?
Phenomenal. The wife did her, usual amazing job of cooking up a feast. Sister came over, nieces, nephew, the kids were there. Phenomenal time at the ranch. Had a really good time. Excited to get into December. We have a month end. We had a shortened trading week, obviously, but the Dow closed up nearly 200 points in a short session. The S&P 500 just had the best month of 2024. The Trumpster is doing what the Trumpster said he was going to do, appointing people left and right. He's got his dance. I may have been the second one to do it after him. I don't know if you remember, about a month and a half ago, we opened with it. It's caught on since. Timestamp it, folks. Go back there and look, man. I think I was one of the first people to get on that trade, man. But no, look, I think this last week for Mr. Trump has been a more balanced week as far as some of his nominations, his Secretary of Labor nomination, his Treasury Secretary nomination. Pretty solid picks and interesting to me because it upset people on both sides. And I think that's why they keep trying to kill him, right? Because he doesn't seem to be following anybody's playbook. I like that aspect of his presidency. We'll see if they allow him to carry it out. But interesting week that the market responded to very well. Again, this isn't a political podcast, right? It's one about making money, but be absolutely clear that just like we mentioned in New Orleans, the Trump presidency has very significant implications for the path forward. And so it's going to be important to pay attention to some of those picks. Interesting to see which ones get through. Was really happy to see Matt Gaetz not, get even to the confirmation stage because that was not going to fly, right? I mean, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago when his name was floated out there as one of his cabinet members. So I'm glad that gentleman has other things to do. Somebody said that it was funny that they made the announcement during lunchtime of the school recess. But glad that he's not getting through. The picks this week have been solid picks at the very least, and interesting to see the markets react. Thoughts on the overall indices? Is everything awesome still?
Everything is more than awesome, as you just said, Gerardo. The S&P just delivered its best performance, monthly performance of the year. I could have sworn democracy was on the ballot, and things seem to be going okay. Who would have thunk that you had 4 previous years to vet this gentleman, like he wasn't the president of the United States before, or something like that. So, still interested to see what the Doge is going to do, right? That's what a lot of folks are talking about. Obviously, there's still a lot of debt issues out there. Inflation comes top of mind for me because, we were talking about Thanksgiving prices recently, and a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the eggs and the chickens and the bird flu and things like that. And I was sort of telling you that inflation was going to come back. And lo and behold, we got inflation numbers this week, PCE. Of course, people don't eat and drive their car, but nonetheless, those numbers are ticking back up, just like they have, $58 to buy their 10 people food for Thanksgiving. So anyway, inflation is back on the rise, which we were saying was going to happen. And I'm not sure if that really relates to Trump, except that, he's still got issues to deal with that he sort of kicked off all these years ago, right? 2020 coronavirus time, when the stimulus checks started going out. And in that way, it's, more of the same. Nothing ever changes, right? The presidential administration is coming in, but we're still dealing with inflation that they told us was transitory. Just to recap what's happened here recently, the Fed started cutting rates in September, essentially declaring victory on inflation. And then Now, lo and behold, it's going back up, right? And so that's what we'll see headed into the new year. At the same time, as I've told you over the years, inflation is okay as long as there's growth, and there seems to be the growth out there, right? We've got this 3-3-3 policy. Speaking of, Trump's picks, 3% economic growth is, right about, it's higher than it's been, with the two handle. So that's okay. An additional, 3 million barrels of oil and gas he wants to produce. And you can see that being reflected in the oil and gas stocks, even as the oil price goes down. I think oil's below $70 now as we record this podcast. And so, as well as anybody that everything's not awesome, Gerardo, except if you're looking at asset prices, which they are, right? You mentioned the S&P, gold, at 2630, 2650, wherever it's at, has come back up $100 in the past week. Bitcoin flirting with the $100,000 mark once again. And strength in the S&P is where I'd kick it back to you with is, it's not the tech stocks anymore. It's not the Magnificent Seven. I pulled it up so I didn't make an error. Let me see if I can click on it real fast. What was leading the markets here recently and top sectors over the past month are: number 1, consumer discretionary; number 2, financials, which is a Trump trade; number 3, industrials, also a Trump trade. That's your machines and your factories and your railroads. Number 4 is energy that I just mentioned, and you don't get into tech stocks until the 5th best sector of the past month. And so, assets and stocks and cryptos and precious metals, all awesome.
Well, I think that's it, folks. Have a great week. It was a great November. Enjoy the rest of the year. No, look, we talked last week. We were in New Orleans, and as you all heard, the focus of that specific episode was really to talk about how consequential the presidency was going to be, and that the narrative that exists today simply can't continue. Right? We're not going to be able to claim victory over inflation while the dollar index flirts with the 106 level once again, while gold is at 2650. Yeah, you got to point out silver closed the month out beautifully at 30.59, held above that $30 level that was really critical technically. But all of these things are not going to continue in lockstep. Just like things don't go up forever, everything doesn't run smoothly forever, folks. And so, what we try to do is predict, where things are headed, as the great Wayne Gretzky used to say, go where the puck is headed, not where the puck is, right? And so where the puck is headed for me is pretty clear cut. I agree with you 100%. I think inflation ramps back up. I think it's a game of hot potato, right? Barack started it and then handed it off to Mr. Trump and then handed it off to Mr. Biden. And now, hey, tag, you're it. It's going to come back, and it's going to happen under Trump's watch, like it or not. He's going to have to own that. But look, I couldn't be more excited going into December and going into 2025, being specifically a natural resource investor, right? A mining investor. The mining stocks to me present some of the most compelling valuations and opportunities that I've seen in my entire 16-year career, especially when I contrast that with how overbought and how out of line, historically anyhow, some of the major indices top performers are when you compare earnings and P's and multiples and all of that, right? I couldn't be more excited for 2025. I think we end the year on a real strong note. You mentioned last week that you thought gold was going to trade sideways for 3 to 6 months, kind of a wait and see approach to see, how effective Mr. Trump is in the first part of his presidency and which one of his picks actually get to go and then what they get to do and once they get to go, and right? Should be interesting. I couldn't be more excited. What'd you think of the conference last week?
I thought the conference was great. Got to catch up with a bunch of friends, colleagues, obviously. Had some nice meals and conversation and laughs. Got to, soft circle some new deals that are coming that we'll be a part of and meet some of the folks who are going to be a part of those. And it was good. The conference was well attended. I thought there was a lot of folks in the main ballroom where the general presentations were going on. It was the 50th anniversary. Worth pointing out that that conference was founded as a hard money, sound money type conference, right? Sound money and freedom of thought under James Blanchard III. There was lots of tributes to him and kudos to Mr. Brian London for keeping the conference going after Mr. Blanchard's departure. And so, and it came at a time when gold was near a record high price, and it's a gold conference. So that was all good. Lots of talk of Bitcoin, obviously, with Bitcoin near $100,000. I saw a very good presentation on cryptocurrency. So it wasn't just, gold focused, right? There was uranium companies there was copper companies there was silver companies there. What else? Takeaways. I mean, it was a good conference. It's your favorite conference, and so
Yeah, absolutely.
you can talk about that. And then there's a little bit of, I guess I have to point out the echo chamber stuff, right? Because that's what stands out to me, right? Gold is always going higher, even though it's up $1,000 in the past X years. When you talk to the silver bugs, it's always going higher, right? The forecast for next year is always higher, and so I guess just a word of caution about those rose-tinted glasses, right? Because, there were some people who stood on stage 2 years ago and said it wasn't time for silver to go to the moon yet, despite what all these other folks were telling you. And then you get silver up to 30 and it's, oh, we're going to 40, we're going to 50. And it's like, well, wait, can't we just be at 30 or 35? And that was, sort of reflective of my gold forecast, right? Sideways is a fine forecast. It doesn't always have to be higher. And so as long as you back it with reasons of merit and reasons of reason and reasons of logic. So anyway, just be careful who you follow. Make sure they're not a zealot. Is one of the things I would say, and get a variety of opinions. Right, as I've said with recipes over the years, take a few and take the best attributes of them. And what did you think of the conference?
I thought that listen, I'll be very transparent. I had several conversations with several uranium executives that had just returned from Washington, and they were as giddy and giggly and starry-eyed as I have ever seen them. Nobody shared anything specifically, but just kind of reading the room and the tone of the conversations, I suspect that we're going to get a pretty robust pro-nuclear stance from the incoming administration. And I think, there's some things that are likely going to be publicized over the next several months that are really favorable in the uranium space. So I would say that I know it was a gold conference. It was masterfully put on by Brian and his staff, as it usually is. The lineup was top notch. Odd to me that I walked away feeling better about uranium this go around at the conference than any other commodity. Though, let me be clear, I think gold goes higher. I think silver goes higher. I'm a huge copper bull. I think that goes higher. That's, the weighting in my portfolio is really overweight precious metals and copper. But I definitely came out of that wanting to add to my uranium exposure. We'll talk companies here a little bit later on. One of, a junior resource speculator pick signed a pretty transformative deal that we'll get into here at the end of this episode. But yeah, I walked away feeling like we're positioned really well for 2025. I just had the conversation with a friend that has a boatload of Patriot battery metals, right? I have several of those because, again, our group still owns 75 to 80% of our position. And I was going over how they're positioned going into 2025. And, we had dinner with the CEO of my favorite silver gold play. And we'll talk about that at the end of the podcast again. But that was a really, really heartening dinner at the end of that conference. And I was only there for a day, but I walked away thinking, we got some damn good positions and we're in early and we have significant stakes in these companies. And I think 2025 is going to be a banner year. Not sure if that's the answer you were looking for, but I like everything, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't like the tech sector. I don't dabble in the major indices. I don't dabble in crypto, although our in-house expert, Chris Curl, has been given $50,000 of our money and has more than doubled that here in very short order. But I couldn't be more excited about the resource space. And I think 2025 is going to be our best year ever. And that's saying a lot coming off the Patriot win, right? Which again, that continues to go lower, though they did have some news, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. They finally talked with the market for a little bit, and guess what? The market responded. So that was heartening to see. So I'm excited is what I'm trying to convey.
I'm excited too. And just to touch off on that, I'm excited about uranium. Obviously, we've been long-term uranium bulls. One of the problems with the gold stocks has been the performance of the gold stocks as a whole, right? So, the question that everybody's been asking is, how have you had this record run in gold and you haven't had the commensurate run in gold equities? And yeah, I sat on the mining share panel with Brian London. It was moderated by Rick Rule. Lobo Tigre was on it. Lawrence Leopard. And
You smoked that, by the way.
we
Kudos.
we were
Yeah.
all asked this question, and sort of, well, I appreciate that. Sort of everybody's answer was, to when are the gold stocks going to catch up is sort of when the rest of the froth comes out of the market. Essentially, there either has to be a major correction, crash, however you want to frame that, or whatever word you want to use. Then earlier you were talking about the valuations and the PEs, and
Yep.
it's sort of an obvious answer, right? Like, why would you invest in a Barrick Gold or a Newmont if you can buy a Riot blockchain that goes up 5% a day, or a Marathon Digital or something like that, right? And it's a very real and honest and fair question, right? Why would you? And there's not really a good answer until you get some course correction on valuation, where the market starts to indicate that, these things are going to be the new trend, or these things are going to attract capital, or these things are going to start to outperform. Because, otherwise you're chasing a group of stocks that is, yes, undervalued, but could stay undervalued for a fair amount of time, right? Especially if gold trades sideways. And so there's definitely other places to make money. Uranium is one of them for sure.
I couldn't agree with you more. Let's talk technical levels. Gold at 2650. I love it at these levels. Silver at 3050. I love it at these levels. You're the chartist technician amongst the two of us. What are you thinking there? Close the month out the way you wanted them to?
Yeah, I pulled silver up for you. It's fine. It's bounced off, it did break 30, bounced off 29 beautifully. That looks like support there, 29.66 if you want a number, $29.70. I mean, basically consolidated sideways since the middle of September, right? Right after the Fed started to cut rates there. It was $27, went up to over 30. And now is digesting its Thanksgiving meal there. So, silver looks good, especially if we're going to get, industrial robustness. I was talking about industrials being one of the top sectors. Well, silver goes back and forth in my mind between industrial metal and precious metal. And, maybe some of the luster of the precious side has come off. But if we're truly going to build new things, and there's going to be an industrial expansion, then silver and copper are going to be where it's at. And those are for real reasons, right? Not Chinese stimulus reasons, which is a sentiment that I've been sort of espousing and echoing for the past couple of months here. So I own silver mining equities. We own them in Foundational Profits, which is the monthly letter. We own a silver ETF. We bought more of that recently as it sort of softened up in the past couple of weeks. We had, speaking of technical levels, we had a level out there that we were waiting on that ETF, and it filled when I slept one night or something like that, and that's what it does. And then it bounced up higher. So bullish on silver. And gold is interesting. I was sort of soft on gold last week. I was saying that it was going to go sideways, and it went down to 25.30, which was the low end of its range, and it's doing the same thing, right? I'm looking at the chart sideways, and it's exactly at 26.50, looking healthy. And again, don't have to make a crazy zealot call, right? I don't have to tell you that gold's going to 2,800. I don't have to tell you that gold's going to 3,000. I do see gold at 25 to 26, 2,700. Thereabouts for the next couple of months. I think and I said this 2 weeks ago, right? I think you're going to get new data coming out, some of which we got this week, showing that inflation is sticking around. I think you have to get through the mental volatility of a new incoming administration and see if that, translates into market volatility. I don't know what else to add on to there, except to say that it's digesting its gains, and whether or not it goes higher or if it stays here is sort of immaterial. I don't see it going much lower, and that's maybe the important takeaway.
Yeah, I think it's a heck of a takeaway. And look, I'm obviously excited for 2025. I'm bullish. Copper, I couldn't be more excited about, the silver company that we recently financed. We mentioned having dinner with the gentleman, the CEO. And look, this is a company with an $8 million market cap that could be a $50 million market cap in 2 months. right? That would be a 6-7-fold win from current levels. And oh, by the way, we're up some 70% since the financing closed. I haven't even received my certificates yet. And we're up some 70% with a full warrant that's already in the money. And so again, we talked about it last week. We talk about it often, but if you're an accredited investor and you're not subscribing to our accredited investor service that Nick and I manage, I don't know what to tell you other than tell you go buy, this company in the open market at 70% higher than what we were able to get into. And again, I don't say that to brag. We offered that to all of our subscribers. We offered that to friends and family. We took down the entire financing between, the multiple groups and management and insiders. And look, this is a company that's going to be drilling in January. And again, the CEO was another one of those gentlemen that, after I got done speaking with them, much like the uranium execs, I walked away really, really happy that I owned such a big position. And honestly, I may be adding to that position here in the open market, despite having a pretty significant holding in that company, which again, we'll talk about here a little bit later. Let's get to copper. How's copper looking for you? Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to interject with some private placement stuff because I've been on this soapbox for a while and I'm just going to stay on it. I want to talk more about private placements because people I still don't think are understanding, but though they're starting to, and I really want to draw some lines in the sand. So yes, they're private placements, but they are in public equities. So if you were to Google this and read about it on like Investopedia, it might come up as something called a PIPE, a private investment in a public equity. I've never really heard it called a PIPE. I don't refer to it as a PIPE. I'll spare you my laying pipe joke, but these are private placements in public stocks. So it's not private in the sense that the company is private. It is liquid. There's a 4-month hold time, but you're in a publicly traded vehicle that you can then sell your shares, and that's important. Yes, sometimes they're small stocks and maybe they don't trade a lot of shares, but they are publicly traded stocks. This isn't, again, a Regulation A or a crowdfunding deal where you're buying private shares of a company that's private, where you can only sell them to another individual on a private market, not through a public stock exchange, right, where there's liquidity. So that's the first line in the sand I wanted to draw. And then the other is, well, a couple of things, but I'll get into it through TikTok or Instagram, right, where I continue where I continue to see. No, they didn't convert me.
Okay. Oh, shit, you don't even like texting. What are you doing on TikTok?
They continue to polarize me. So I saw this reel the other day, or a short video, if you don't know what a reel is. And it was this gentleman sitting at a Chipotle table, and he got out his little lunch, his burrito. And then his flex was that he could afford the avocado, right? We know that's a funny joke. It's Chipotle. Sure. You got to upgrade for the avocado. This gentleman, though, was fishing for you to give him $50,000. To participate in a private investment, I should say, not a private placement, a private investment. And it was real estate related, as many of these are. And that's what I wanted to talk about for a second. You also need to be accredited investor to do, private investments in real estate. Sure. I know because I vetted some of these deals, and maybe you have too. Where, someone's building an apartment complex, they need to raise X $1 million, and you look at the term sheet and you give them whatever, 50 grand or 100 grand. This gentleman who had the avocado was looking for 50 grand. And first, let me talk about the avocado because, that's a gimmick or a shtick, right? I've talked about these TikTok finance things for a while, including the one where you're supposed to hack an ATM by depositing a check that was going to bounce and then withdrawing the funds. I continue to think that TikTok and Instagram probably aren't the most fertile ground if you're hunting for viable, true, real deals for high net worth investors, right? Like the folks that are participating in these deals alongside us and that we're participating in and are participating on them. Yeah, they understand that you got to pay more for the Chipotle avocado, right? But that's not the target market, man. Like, yeah, that's cute and all, but whatever. You're in your mid-20s and you're sort of barking up the wrong tree with that approach, right? Like real wealth is different than the avocado at Chipotle, right? And so that was the first thing I wanted to say. If you're looking for that sort of clientele, and it's hard to find that clientele, admittedly, right? Like we've been seeking
Sure.
those sort of people as well. What we found is that, we find more people that manage money on behalf of other people is what I've been seeing differently.
Sure.
I'm not sure how those people respond to getting guacamole, but anyway, the other thing about real estate deals is that it's a cash flow game, right? And that's the real difference between stocks, right? So, and it's why I've never done one of these private deals in an apartment complex, right? Because you got to build the apartment complex, you got to lease out the apartment complex, you got to pay back the loan for the apartment complex, and then maybe in year 3,
Yeah.
4, 5, you're cash flowing or something like that, right? And different strokes for different folks.
Sure.
Real estate can be a viable investment, but what we're talking about here, and what you just said, Gerardo, is we wrote a check into a private placement at 25 cents or whatever the level is.
Mhm.
You'll get your certificates here in the next couple of weeks, and after the fourth month, you can then sell those shares. You don't have to wait for an apartment complex to be built. There's no tenants involved. Nobody has to pay their rent. If stock price is higher than you paid, you can sell it and make money, right? Has nothing to do with anybody else, with real estate, with location, with geography. Maybe it does, depending on where the asset is, et cetera. But you understand what I'm saying.
Mhm.
And so anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now, but there's different types of private placements. We're doing them in publicly traded vehicles or in companies that are coming to IPO, i.e. we're financing the IPO round, and then the company will trade and you'll get your money back. And they're not real estate deals is the other thing. And they're not private equity deals. We're not owning businesses. We're not waiting for cash flow. All we need is the share price to go up. And there's lots of different things that could make that happen. We're not worried
Sure.
about operating a business here to a certain degree. So anyway, just continuing to make distinctions about these types of private placements and why we do them. Oh, by the way, you mentioned the warrant, which is people are starting to get. I had a buddy asking me the other day, and he's in the real estate interest. He was like, I watched your podcast the other week when you were in New Orleans. He was like, so when you have a warrant, he was like, if the stock goes up to that price, you could just buy more. He's like, that sounds like a pretty good way to make more money. And I was like, yeah, man, no doubt. And then I had to explain also that, like, if it goes down, you don't have any downside
Correct.
risk. Except for the initial share you bought. Like, you don't have to exercise it. There's no time decay. Like, there's an option. You don't have to get rid of it. Like, it'll just expire. And he's like, oh, man, that's super interesting. And I'm like, yeah, man, like, let me continue drilling this into people's head. That's why I spent a couple of minutes talking about it.
And again, look, and let's just get into it. We're almost at the 30-minute mark here, right? The company that I was talking about, the silver company, I'm going to give you all a freebie because this is going to be behind a paywall here very, very soon. It's going to be one of the last freebies for everyone out there. Kingsmen Resources will trade in dollars, not cents, in 2025. Shares currently trade at 44 cents. We financed it at 25 cents. We have a full warrant at 40 cents. That's good for, I want to say, 2 or 3 years. Let's call it 2. And they're drilling in January. I don't know how much simpler I can make it for everybody by giving you a free pip that's going to make you, likely going to make you significant amounts of capital. I mean, that's all I really can do, right? Is give you the free pick and encourage you if you are allocating more than $5,000 or $10,000 in the market and you're an accredited investor, should absolutely be on our list, and you should absolutely be buying that service because the deal flow isn't slowing down anytime soon. Nick and I aren't going anywhere. We didn't work as hard as we have the past 16 years, nearly 2 decades, to finally get in a position where we have one of the greatest commodity super cycles that I've ever seen, and finally in a position where we get to pick our deals, right? And we're fortunate enough to be able to do so. So by default, our subscribers are able to pick their deals. And so that's your freebie for the day, y'all. Go buy Kingsmen Resources. We had dinner with the CEO. He owns 37% of the company. We told you last week, the company is now trading at all-time highs, actually, at 44 cents. The company's headed much higher. January comes quick. The drill rigs will be turning in mid-January, and I fully expect the company to hit right off the bat because it's underground mining, and we can see where the mineralization is. We can see the structures. We see where it's running. So that's as easy as I can make it for folks out there, whether you have $200, $2,000, $100,000, whatever you're playing the market with. Kingsmen Resources is a heck of a silver gold speculation in the space. Tiny $8 million market cap. This is the second week in a row now that I've kind of pounded that drum and beat that drum. It's the last time you're going to hear me say it about Kingsmen, other than to tell you, I told you so in a couple of months. Fingers crossed, right?
I'm going to get that guacamole.
Hey, let's talk stocks. Patriot Battery Metals, I've been respectfully critical as a retail shareholder slash family office slash, our group still has millions of Patriot shares. I've been respectfully critical that the company was too silent for too long. With that being said, I've also been very vocal about the fact, privately and publicly, that they have executed brilliantly. It was really good to see a news release that not only highlighted that, but the webinar that Ken Brinsden put on, Patriot CEO. It was really well done. It was really informative. The market took to it really well. I don't think it's a coincidence that, the stock bounced some 15, 20% this week shortly after that webinar. I suspect, and he kind of teased it in that webinar. He teased the fact that they were blacked out from buying stock. I know there's assays pending. I suspect there's more to them being blacked out than just assays pending. Again, as someone that still holds, in several different accounts, a lot of Patriot Battery Metals exposure, I got to believe this is the bottom. And yes, it's been painful to see it go from 17 to 2 to 250 to 3, right? But as one of our advisors mentioned, well, we were in New Orleans. Hey, we're still up 15-fold, right? We're still up 20-fold with a lot of runway there. I think Patriot's a heck of a speculation for contrarians that believe there is a future in lithium, like I believe, like Ken Brinsden believes. And look, he's done this before. He's taken a penny company and turned it into a $9-10 billion company. This isn't going to be a walk in the park to get it back to $15 or $20. But yeah, absolutely, you can get there here over the next couple of years with the right partner and with lithium turning back up the way I suspect, and more importantly, the way Ken suspects it will turn. So there's 2 picks. Anything that you're watching, Nick, out there in the market that really struck your fancy?
I mean, I can give you picks. I'm going to talk about the mining share panel again for 1 second, because you mentioned a word there that I heard a lot at the conference from not one of our advisors, but, the advisor essentially to the entire junior space, Mr. Rule, Rick Rule, that is. And you mentioned contrarian, being contrarian. And of course, you're either a contrarian or you're a victim, right, Gerardo? He said that multiple times during his individual talk. He says it all the time in general. He said it in his interviews that he gave. He said it on the mining share panel that when we were talking, and it's exactly right for uranium. So if you just round tripped it or you entirely missed it, really doesn't matter, because it's back at the bottom now. And so commodities are cyclical. And so you have a chance to buy lithium stocks today, while the lithium price is the same price it was in 2019 or 2020, right? Before it 8x'd from $10,000 a pound to 80,000, no, not a pound, excuse me, a ton of lithium carbonate to $80,000 a ton of lithium carbonate. And so if you're you're either a contrarian or a victim. And if you're a contrarian, you should be buying lithium stocks right now. And so when he asked for tickers, just like you're asking for, in the traditional way that he asked for them, because why, Gerardo? Because people like to have the fish served up to them. They don't like to go fishing. They want them on the plate with the appropriate garnish and accoutrement. And it's funny that people are just starting to talk about Rick Ruleisms now. I noticed that even Charlotte asked him in the beginning of the Investing News interview how many Rick Ruleisms she was going to get during the interview. It's amazing. But I gave him a lithium name, and that lithium name was Q2 Metals. It's a company we've talked about on this podcast, and I obviously talked about on panels, and we talk about in our paid letters. And it's the honest answer to the question, what do you recommend right now? I just sent them several tens of thousands of dollars to exercise warrants, right? That we have, speaking of warrants, speaking of private placements, that are in the money. Why? Well, for lots of reasons. They're in the money. I believe they're going higher. Everything I just said. I think that lithium is a contrarian bet right now. I don't think it stays at $10,000 a ton forever. I think that Q2 has, also speaking of blackouts, Alicia mentioned in her most recent interview with you on Resource Digest that she's been blacked out and is looking forward to getting back to buying shares. And I like to hear that from a CEO. They should have more assays coming out. And they just significantly expanded their land package. So
Tripled it.
whether it's Patriot or whether it's Q2, I think lithium is a smart contrarian bet right now, and that's one of the names I would give you. And then the other thing I would say, which I also said on the panel, and this sort of applies to the entire space right now, is it's never been really easier to separate the wheat from the chaff and the real stories from the podunk stories and the rollback stories and the moosh passer
Correct.
stories. And you only got to give your money to the former group there. So, you just went through, I keep it to lithium. You just went through a lithium boom and bust. Don't fuck it up in the second round here and buy companies that are putting out 10 meters of 1.5% lithium spodumene, right? Patriot and Q2 have hundreds of meters of nearly 2% lithium spodumene. You don't have to. I'm going to cuss again, fuck around with these dumb companies. So, listen to the smart people, put your money where the smart people are putting it. And again, that applies across commodities. So I'll mention Aldebaran again, because I mentioned it a couple of times. I mentioned it on that panel, and I listened to their webcast this week because they had one, because they just put out a resource estimate where, I'll pull it up.
Congrats, John.
Holy shit.
Smokes. That's how you update a resource, folks.
So I had to take screenshots because I was like, what? They have, I'm just going to read it, 22 billion pounds of copper in the M&I measured and
billions
indicated.
and billions and billions.
9.8 billion pounds inferred. Now we'll go to the gold. 5 million ounces M&I, 1.7 million ounces inferred. And then the silver, 93.76 million ounces M&I, nearly 50 million ounces inferred. So just a gargantuan resource update. And this is something we talked about months and months and months ago, right? How Altar Central was in the middle and it was going to unite the whole thing into one big blob. And I'm not going to repeat the whole story, but this is one where Newton, which is, a Rio Tinto leaching technologies, come in and essentially JV'd the project with non-dilutive capital to the tunes of, tens and tens of millions of dollars. And now we're down the road to a PEA, et cetera. And this is one of the good groups in the space having success. And so to recap what success looks like, it's financing it at 30 cents back in 2020, and then shares going to $2.30 on the back of this resource estimate. And us having recommended that private placement, and I've got people in the open market and below that private placement, like at 28 cents. And so, those are real wins, and that's real money, and that's real guacamole. So, anyway, that's one of the real projects that multiple people have recommended, right? It's one of those ones where it was not easy, but easy to say, look, John Black sold, and his team, right, Kevin Heather, et cetera, has sold an asset before, and this asset is very similar and is analogous to whatever, Filo, and is in the right address, San Juan, Argentina, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking because this is a free podcast.
Well, imagine if you had invested and had millions of shares in a company that could have multiple Filos and has a market cap of $60-70 million right now, where one Filo was worth $4 billion. And we think we might have several Filos, right? We're going to find out very, very shortly. There was, some news on that front. Before we go, I want to highlight a company that trading is halted because they had some transformational news. I mentioned uranium. I mentioned a pick that I really like. This is a portfolio pick. I love the team. Cosa Resources just executed a deal to acquire 70% of 3 Denison properties. Denison also coming in and taking an equity stake. I've said repeatedly when I recommended the stock in Junior Resource Speculator, and it pulled back some 20-30% after we made some 60% the first time around trading around it. But I said repeatedly that that's a team with a history of serial success and a network. I can't highlight and stress that network and how important that is in these bull markets to pull off deals this way. I have zero doubt that they will eventually land on a pretty significant discovery. Curious to see where shares trade once the halt is lifted. But congrats to Cosa Resources. A hell of a job executing during a time of the year where, let's be honest, a lot of executives are taking time off, and it's Thanksgiving, and it was Thanksgiving last month, I believe, in Canada, and Christmas is right around the corner, Hanukkah, the New Year, the holidays, all of that. real easy to punt stuff until January. Cheers to the teams that are out there adding value, working hard, looking to add during the quiet times. That's how you get it done. There's a lot of companies right now that frankly, are just paying to keep the lights on and to pay their salaries. And I have zero interest in financing or funding or helping those companies exist. But I absolutely want to highlight the companies that are out there working their behinds off, because it's real easy to get negative in this industry sometimes and just point out the bad and not point out some of the real good work that's being done. So kudos to Cosa, man. Congrats.
You're speaking to a negative Nelly. It's definitely easy to get pessimistic in the junior mining space. You don't say. But the other side of that is the Denison is a heck of an investment as well. So, and it's a recommended company of mine in one of my letters, and I am a shareholder of Denison. And I just want to tell you why, and to give you a little bit more value, again, for free, which won't be free in the next 5 episodes. After the 300th episode, we're going paid. But this isn't the first time Denison has done this, and it's not the first commodity Denison has done it with. So a couple of months ago, they did the same thing they just did with Cosa with a company called Foremost Lithium, where Denison had some companies or some assets that, they partnered with Foremost Lithium to explore. And so by investing in Denison, you get exposure to this other stuff as well, right? We just talked about how lithium was a good contrarian bet. You just talked about how they JV'd 3 prospective projects with Cosa Resources. I would liken this to something like Alamos Gold in the gold space, right? Where Alamos Gold goes in and partners or gives these companies money and then can dictate the exploration strategy, right? But it's really just an exploration arm of Denison or of Alamos. And then when the time is right, they already have a toehold, so they can go and absorb these entities. Or, conversely, not to poo-poo, but, starve them out in some respects and get them on the cheap, which is what Alamos has done with a couple of deals. And Denison is a smart play, because you just said that you walked away from New Orleans, being incredibly bullish about uranium. And Denison gives you all the things, right? Denison gives you exploration, which I just said. Denison gives you the mill, which they have a percentage of. Denison gives you production, and Denison gives you alternative production technology. So they're also pioneering in-situ leaching for basement-hosted Saskatchewan Athabasca uranium projects, right? So I always thought Denison was a smart way to invest in uranium, and you said kudos to management teams for getting deals done. Well, the flip side of Cosa, which is a good deal for them, is Denison getting exploration as well. So there's 2 ways. There's always multiple ways to skin a cat. There's different ways to invest in things, and so just looking at that deal from the Denison side as opposed to the Cosa side. But yeah, you can invest in both.
Yeah, no. Heck of a deal. The timing couldn't be better. Again, I couldn't be more excited to close the year out. We like gold. We like copper. We like uranium. We think lithium's at the bottom. We think it's turning. Patriot remains a strong buy. It will be so. And I know I sound like a broken record. I said it at 16 cents. I said it at $17. Here we are at nearly $3. It will be in the portfolio and a holding until it is bought out at much higher prices, or it is put into production at many multiples of today's price. I'm supposed to remind you guys to go to dailyprofitcycle.com/subscribe for all the free content that you need, from everything crypto, cannabis, Bitcoin, you name it, resource stocks, my ranting, my raving, Mr. Hodges' witty and intelligent conversation and dialogue, and of course, the intelligent dialogue of all our talented editors. That's all I got, Nick. Anything else on your plate? Anything you want to get off your chest before we go?
Oh, I got plenty, Gerardo, but I'll save it for one of these last couple of free episodes. I've got some Spokane politics to talk about, and I've got some West Coast Conference volleyball to talk about, but we'll save it for next week.
I like it. We'll do it next week. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This was the 295th episode of our weekly therapy session that we call Investing in Bizarro World. Have a great December, everybody.
Bye. Get yourself some guacamole.
Hey there, you independent-minded investor. If you like this video, make sure to tell us so by clicking the like button below. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another one. And share it with everyone you know on social media. You can also click the link in the description below to check out more information-packed videos just like this one. Thanks for watching.